lot of good things about it.
I mean, like,
Alrighty, guys, we are going to go ahead and get started here. Sean is going to come in at 9:15, so there's a couple things I just want to talk about this morning before that. First things first, next Wednesday we have our monthly sales meeting on the 9th. Since it is November, month of Thanksgiving, we thought we were going to do a little breakfast potluck. So I'm inviting each and every one of you to make your favorite breakfast dish and bring it in next Wednesday at 8:15 in the morning. We will have a little Thanksgiving potluck.
I'll take that.
Bring in some bacon.
There you go. Bacon is fine.
Cereal.
Cereal is good too.
Cereal.
Are you bringing cereal?
Lucky Charms, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, whatever you got. But that is next Wednesday the 9th at 8:15. We will be having our little breakfast potluck. Couple things I want to talk about. Tom and I were out west at the Century 21 conference last week. So just a couple little things I want to say. We'll talk about it more next week. But ultimately, here is a slide that corporate, was showing to. They do understand nationally we are in what they're calling a market rebalance. Some areas have seen 30 to 40% decreases in sales. So basically what they want us to understand as well is a lot of 2022 and all of 2021, a lot of 2020 and all of 2021 was an anomaly. As far as numbers, when you look, record low interest rates, record high sales prices, all of that. So for those of you that have only ever been in that market, I want you guys to understand and be able to educate your customers that that was an anomaly. That is not historically accurate. Again, this kind of shows your historical average of where things are with existing home sales. So if your baseline is 2020 or 2021, just make sure you understand your baseline is an outlier and not the norm. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, sir.
While things are rebalancing and shifting, we are moving towards more normal numbers and figures, which in my opinion is something healthy for our market. In Citrus County, if the prices were going to keep going where they were going, we pretty much would have priced everybody out of buying a home in Citrus County. We're seeing that now with a lot of USDA, FHA, VA customers. Other places in the country are well worse off than we are. I spoke to a gentleman that I know who has a brokerage out in Hawaii. His sales have dropped by over 50% because his big book of business was military members that were stationed in Hawaii. None of them can afford any of the house prices that are currently going on in Hawaii. So a market rebalance is something healthy for him and for a lot of this country. So again, this is not the doom and gloom, the market is over. This is something that's going to open up the buyer pool some more again. Opening up the buyer pool will help a lot of sellers. We also need to make sure that they understand, pricing is now much more serious on our CMA numbers than just testing it out at 10, 20, 30% over our CMA numbers. So that was slide one.
Would it mean that if pricing is a look in the rear view mirror and the market is kind of rebalancing and normalizing, and the last, 21 from now, maybe a few months ago, till the beginning of 21 was an anomaly, if we're going to forecast forward looking behind without, adjusting the numbers to a way where we can actually find critical price points. Would you guys suggest a percentage or at least a consideration or a conversation with the sellers to better adjust them or teach them that, these changes are being made?
Yeah, so right now, again, I'm going to talk about more residential than anything, but ultimately if we're doing our CMAs, and we're pulling our comps from the past 6 months, again, we're starting to get into that transition phase, but 6 months ago, the market was still, I would say, better than it is now. But my opinion is there's not going to be a percentage that I would add, but I would stick a lot firmer to my CMA number versus the test the market concept that we pretty much everybody had been doing over the last year and a half. My CMA is 300,000, but sure, let's test it at 350, see what happens. That ship has sailed. Again, I don't want you guys to lose listings, but I want you to be very informative, knowledgeable of what this market is doing and being able to educate the sellers on those principles and those ideas. Again, most of us have listings now that have sat for way longer than we think they should have, whether it was because we had that price test and the market changed. Again, timing is everything in this industry, and right now some sellers need to understand that they may have missed that. Let's test the market window and see. Now, if they want to try it, absolutely. But again, what I would do then is my follow-up's going to be even more intense. Golden ruler is going to happen. We're going to show them the clicks on Zillow, the saves on Zillow, the clicks on Realtor, all of that stuff. So again, we can go at them and say, we've done everything that we always do to be the #1 office in Citrus County. We've marketed it. We've got it on all the websites. We got the professional photography. And right now my phone is not ringing at all. That's going to then be the conversation of, hey, we need to look at that price. And again, it's probably going to need to be sooner than later. With that being said, if a home doesn't sell in a week or two, it's not the end of the world. Our average days on market is now up north of 90 days, meaning that's half of our listing term. You want to educate your customers, your sellers on this. If they're still, their heads in the clouds from a year ago and they think we're going to get an offer in a week, and then you're doing something wrong because that offer didn't happen in a week, you're looking like the bad guy. So again, up front, we want to educate our sellers. Average days on market has gone up some. Things are still selling, but the days on market has gone up.
Wayne,
Yes.
can you repeat that? Two facts that I think I want to remember and have in my head. Our average price per square foot, like from 6 months ago or whatever the heat of the seller's market was, and like average price per square foot. Now I can say to people, here are the stats.
Right.
This is where it was. This is where it is across the county.
Yeah.
And then also what you just said, the days on market, what it was, I mean, it was like 3 days. And then, now.
Right. We went from across the board from, I mean, in the heat of everything, we had basically a 14-day on market average across the board, all things MLS. Residential. Commercial is going to be a different animal still, but residential about 14 to 17 days. We are now north of 90. So you can obviously see a pretty drastic change. Average square foot pricing, I don't know across the board. I can tell you it has shifted. What I would do with average price per square foot, I would want to categorize it more into what you are doing a CMA on. So if you want to do it average days on market for 3.2s in the Inverness area, get something like that. The averages across the board for all of the county, I think you're going to get too many outliers. You got Waterfront and Crystal River, that's a different animal than Highlands, that's a different animal than Lakefront. So for the average square foot, I would get it a little bit more focused because it's but you're still going to see that shift because again, across the board, there has been a definite slowdown. And again, every day, if you guys look on Matrix, price reductions are happening more and more. There are more and more expired listings, which again, in the next, few weeks, we're going to have some classes on price reduction conversations, appropriate pricing, all of these things, because for those agents that have only been in this amazing market, you do want to be able to have these conversations. So we want to make sure you have the knowledge and the know-how.
I've had this objection lately. I have a very challenging customer, and we started off in a period where we could try out that pricing, and then the market quickly shifted. We got offers they should have took, and they didn't.
Absolutely.
And I think something that really helped is what Wayne was talking about, is just being able to educate them, not just on a price per square foot, not just on a, arbitrary number, but kind of showing the story of the market is, reframing or adjusting or recessing, whatever word you want to use, and just pinning it back down that we need to make these types of reductions to get to your end goal. And I felt that was really beneficial, and using the data like this and stuff and like leveraging that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't mean.
No, you're good. This slide here, just so kind of everybody understands, we saw the historical average 2022. It's down 1% on the average for home sales. However, the commission pool, yes, it's dropped from 2021, but historically we're still 25 billion up. So your commissions haven't gone anywhere, guys. Promise. Things are still selling. Things are still going. Commissions are still coming in. Obviously, this conversation I have with you guys, this is not something you need to talk about with your customers, but average commissions as a whole are still much higher than they ever have been. Dollar in, across the board. So things are still moving great. Stuff is still selling. Commissions are still coming in. Any questions on those two slides? Does that kind of make sense? Again, we will do a full overview. I just wanted to start off with that before Sean starts talking. The other thing I want to make an announcement with, Mondays, Tom is going to start doing Moxie training. So we'll have Moxie Mondays. Does everybody prefer the mornings over the afternoons as far as training goes? Yes? Well, 9 o'clock is what I'm thinking. So we keep it at the 9. We'll do the 9s again. So Monday mornings at 9 o'clock. Tom and myself, I'm not just going to put it on Tom, but one thing we learned while we were there, we learned a lot about Moxie, lots of things we didn't know about. Just real quick, because I know Sean's going to want to start here in a few minutes. I just want to show you guys what Tom was able to do in, I don't know, 30 minutes, an hour. This is what Moxie has the ability, well, this is part of the Moxie website stuff. So everything you see here, Tom was able to customize, make unique to this website. Neighborhood news is a huge thing we're going to talk about. That's really cool. We learned a lot of good strategies from it. We have the ability to add additional websites into here, pictures, the works. So we've really been able to find out there's a lot of fine tuning. There's a lot of customization that you have the ability to see and do through the Moxie websites. So we're excited to show you guys that, share everything with that. The presentation online and on a tablet is amazing. Lot more stuff than we ever thought we could do. So we want you guys to have the best of the best, and we think this is the platform to do it with. All right, Sean, are you ready?
Yes.
Give you the introductions. Do you need me to pull anything up on screen?
No, I'm good.
All right.
Hello, everyone. I want to introduce Tom Delgado from my office. He's one of our loan approval specialists. He's going to hand out some packets.
Thanks for breakfast. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing? How's everybody doing?
Good.
We're awake.
So, for those who don't know, my name's Sean Stevens, Metroplex Mortgage Services. Once again, this is Tom. I know most of you by now, but for those of you who don't know, I had a chance to hear some of Wayne's parting shots. Couldn't be more accurate. I see it from the financing side, and the word I guess, how I would explain the market had a lot more flexibility. So let's say 7-8 months ago, I'm talking to buyers and they say, well, 7% is pretty high, 6.5 is pretty high, 7.5 is pretty high. I said, well, rates are going up. I said, whatever the percent is better than 100% rent. And on top of that, like 7-8 months ago, our USDA, VA, FHA buyers weren't even getting opportunities. And I said, because the rates have gone up, that's created opportunities for a wider buyer pool. Where a lot of the sellers, as the homes sit on the market, is, stats are perfect for what I wanted to talk about at the beginning. Because as there's not as many, there are still cash buyers out there. What would you guys say? How many, compared to 6 to 10 months ago, what would you say the cash buyer pool is right now compared to then?
We're probably 40% now. We were probably at like 60, so
Right,
probably
right.
20% decrease.
So we've seen also a decrease in some of the conventional buyers too. Because those rate increases have really impacted, especially a lot of the second home products, because there's different interest rate adjustments already built into those. So those rates are even going even higher. I mean, still with USDA, VA, FHA, I'm getting better rates. I just kind of got somebody locked in with a 650 score last week on USDA, 6.375. Whereas we're having a second home conversation with conventional loans with their higher scores, they're going to be in the sevens. So there's a big shift for that affordability there is still too. And I'm getting a lot of agents coming back and saying, Sean, tell me about what we used to talk about. Just kind of like we're replaying, like, because the agents have told me, said, Sean, I've forgotten this. We used to do this as a staple. Now, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We're still in that mode right now where how can we make deals work? We're seeing a lot of, let's say, mortgage malpractice out there, a lot of lenders screwing up deals. So you need to be very, very vigilant on who's doing the financing, make the call, check with them, have a conversation. Find out, so I don't know who this lender is, call the loan officer, find out who's doing the loan, what is their experience on that particular program. I guess before I get started, there's any starting questions or concerns? I know Stefan had a great call yesterday about private roads. We're going to talk about that because that comes up quite a bit. We had that on our VA loan. What are any questions, concerns, I guess, to start off with?
I mean, what's been about the shift that you've seen now of USDA, VA getting back into the game?
Huge.
Yeah.
So we've seen obviously sellers being more amenable to all types of offers instead of that cash conventional mindset. We've seen our buyer demand and the amount of people that want to get qualified is at record level highs. Okay, have interest rates affected some of them? It has, but incomes have gone up too. So interest rates are not my big concern. My big concern is inventory and getting our buyers basically a crack at the apple, getting them a shot at getting into the home. And now that shift is allowed, because we work with conventional loans too. And we're heavily known for our USDA, VA, and FHA expertise. So, because we were talking on the VA loan we spoke on a Saturday, got everything up and running. We closed at, what was it, 650 sales price? 657, or six in that range. 30-day close.
I want to speak to that issue when you're finished.
Okay. So 30-day closing. We recently closed 2 USDA loans, 25 and 26 days. Because before we go into like some of the details here, the big thing to understand is when you're working with us, because we're the approving lender, USDA and VA, we're doing all that underwriting in my office. I mean, I started a company now, March of 2001. So 21, March will be 22 years ago. So I'm a mortgage dinosaur. I am. I got in the industry back in 98 after moving here from Ohio. So I am a true mortgage dinosaur going through all these different changes. And a lot of these companies out there have just come on the radar the last 3 or 4 years. So you got to remember, most of these loan officers out there are used to doing conventional loans, 2.5% rate refinances, which that's not a specialty. I mean, it's like being a cash buyer specialist, I guess you could say. That's something is like, it might be easier to do, let's say. So when we're doing everything, we're doing all that manufacturing in our office, and you get all the resources we have, like all our experience, like the assembly line approach that we put together. So yes.
Just one quick
Please.
thing that I want to make sure you cover. I've gotten a lot of agents, we're getting listings, and they're saying, I'm not sure this will go VA or FHA because
yes.
maybe this little thing or that little thing. Again, we talked about open up the buyer pool. My answer is always like, I'd give it a shot before I just instantly say no, unless it's blatantly obvious. So can we talk about a little bit of what it's like the absolute no-go of like, no, it won't go FHA or VA or USDA, and the myths of it? Because I know there's plenty
that's a great question. I love it. So that's probably one of the most frustrating calls I get. Well, Sean, this isn't going to go USDA. This isn't going to go VA. And actually, let's start with USDA. I've got multiple loans going right now where we're doing repairs after closing. That's a great segue into what I want. So under USDA, let's start there. And I'm not going to throw everything at you today so you walk out here and say, what happened? What did he just say? I'm going to give you a big picture so you know what can be possible. So we're getting a lot of roof questions, especially in those areas where the hurricane went through. And remember, for those of you who've been in Florida, let's say 05, 06, when all those hurricanes came through, all those new roofs went on. So those roofs are like getting 15 years old. So they're needing new roofs anyway. So the hurricane really exacerbated that. So we're getting a lot of questions, okay, roof repairs, drain field issues, septic tank, a lot of these questions that are coming up. So we got one transaction right now going down the highway. We got multiple ones with roof, where we can finance the roof into the loan to be done post-closing. Okay, so there's ways we can do roof repairs post-closing on USDA. We can include it with the loan. VA, we can do that as well too, but VA won't allow that to go into the loan. I'll talk about that in a minute. So depending on the repairs, in this case, they agree to do the septic and the drain field before closing, and then they're doing the roof repairs after. So the seller, they build in the price, so the seller's holding back that money. How it works is basically the seller agreed to pay for these, they knew they were issues. The buyer gave them list price, the seller's paying for these repairs. But the seller doesn't have to do the roof before closing. So they're not worried about if the loan's going to close or not, the buyer's going to back out. They agree to do the septic and the drain field before, and then we're doing the roof repairs after. We got invoices from the contractor, we got our estimates in the file. So then once the loan closes, that money's set aside in the title company. The contractor does the work, they know the money is there, the loan's closed, seller's got their proceeds, commission checks are cut, buyer's got the keys. Then the roof repairs are done post-closing. Yes?
Permit is the roof pulled under seller or buyer?
It's going to be under, at that point, it would be under the buyer, because I don't know as far as when the roofer would technically pull the permit. He would do the estimate. He would go out there and do the bid for the job. And then it's my assumption that they are going to then pull the permit after closing, because that's when the work is done in the buyer's name.
I've run into trouble with that, so I was just.
Yeah.
So I think logically from a timing standpoint, it's going to be the buyer takes ownership, the buyer's the owner, and then they do the work, the permit's pulled in their name.
Do you have experience?
Yes.
Have you been able to source some insurance companies that work alongside? Because that's the other problem is like
Yes.
we're trying to find an insurance company that'll write a policy for you guys to close the loan.
Yeah, so that's another great question.
Rachel's a roofer.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm not.
So
I'm not a roofer. No, I agree with what you said, that the buyer, it has to be in the buyer's name.
Right.
Yeah,
Because the seller's
because the
outside. the line.
NOC has to be in whoever's gonna be responsible for it, which is gonna be the buyer.
So I'm glad we had expertise on the.
I'm not a
Thank you for that validation. I love it. Okay. Good. Thank you for that. All right. So there we know. It's pulled in the buyer's name 100%. Okay. So yes.
In that the case, is it the lender really require the timeline for the roof finish? Sometimes, for the material supply, 3 months, 6 months for the roof finish.
We have flexibility. 6 months is going to be the cutoff. Usually we're seeing it done within 90 days.
Got it.
Okay. And as Wayne mentioned, how can we get insurance for some of these? For example, the one carrier we're one agent working with right now, she said we can get the roof, we can get it bound with the roof repairs being done after closing. They're getting an estimate of the roof repairs, and they said we need to have, though, to make this work for that particular home, we need to have a clear 4-point, except for the roof. So everything else they went through and did a clear, they got the 4-point, there's some like nickel and dime stuff they got cleaned up, but they had a clear 4-point, and we're gonna get insurance bound with the roof repairs being done post-closing. Now, speaking with the roof repairs, VA will allow the same type of process where there's roof repairs. So VA has some different criteria, but like roof repairs is a great example. You can hold that back from the seller's proceeds, or the veteran could contribute to that. VA is going to require a 150% deposit. Okay, so what I mean by that is, let's say the roof repair is $20,000. 150% of that would be $30,000. Okay, so VA is going to require $30,000 to be in escrow. Not 150% of it, but I mean, VA would require a $30,000 escrow. And then once the roof is done, that extra 50% deposit gets refunded to whoever put it in. Okay, and I'll walk you through these details, but those are ways we can work through some of those objections. Well, this is not going to go for VA or USDA. Other common questions, let's say the air conditioning unit's out, USDA, we can finance that in there. So really any type of repair questions, that we can do. There's a lot of features under USDA and VA that I don't have under FHA and conventional, which allow flexibility post-closing. So don't ever think, okay, this is out of sight, out of mind. You can actually use that as a selling point when you're doing that negotiation. That yes, we know there needs to be roof repairs. What if we can do that after closing for the seller? And then they don't, because the seller doesn't, a lot of feedback I'm getting is sometimes it's an estate property, or maybe they don't have the cash to do the work up front. They got it in the equity. Then you can push that to after closing. I think that's a big selling point from what buyer putting their offer in. So USDA and VA, obviously big benefits to the buyer is no down payment requirement. Sellers are not required to pay for anything extra that they don't agree to in the contract. That's a myth. That's another myth we hear. The seller doesn't want those loans because they got to pay extra for them. No, they don't. The seller doesn't even, one of the other myths we have is the seller has to pay for things like the termite inspection on a VA loan. That's 100% false.
Can you add the seller's closing costs onto the sale price? Is that legal?
If it appraises.
Well, that's the second question, and I think that's the big objection. In the past, these properties weren't appraising, so we burned a lot of bridges by trying to recommend VA, FHA, and that's why we started shying away from it, because you let 6 months or 3 months go by, 2 months, however long it takes to qualify and get the no. But the two questions are, can you add the cost of closing in? Is it legal?
So when you say the cost of closing into
The seller's cost contribution to the buyers, or on a VA loan or whatever's going on.
so you say, okay, for example, let's say we have a 250 sales price, and you said, okay, the seller wants to pay 5,000 towards buyer's closing cost, then you raise it to 255.
Can you do that?
You can, so long as it appraises.
Okay, but it's legal to do that?
Yes.
I've got a USDA loan where that's what they're doing.
Well, it's a good way to do it,
Working on
because then you're not, the
seller.
seller isn't paying the closing costs, because if you remember, we've had trouble. Let's say that 250 sale price, you got 5,000 seller contribution, they say no. They don't want to, they don't have to, because in 14 days, it'll sell for cash, but now what's happening, the market shifted.
Right.
Now we can say 255, we have someone, the next question is, how long does it take to, or can you pre-qualify VA, FHA, so you don't burn that time?
It could be 24 hours.
So you can do that. So
Now remember with that, okay, the caveat to that is the buyer. Okay, if we get a buyer in that's a 760 credit score, they got social security income, disability income, it's fixed income, where there's not, the variables are tightened down, then yeah, that's a 24-hour, that could be a same day qualification. If you get someone that's heavy commission based, self-employed, multiple jobs over the past 2 years, that's gonna be one of those where we say, listen, the scores are good, everything they told us looks good, we need to have a deeper dive into this file. Like I was working on one last night where they're down in Hardy County, they're buying a property from their relatives through an estate, 609 credit score, he's got extra teaching income, they're gonna be putting down like 100,000 from the estate sale, but there's credit questions, there's debt to income ratio, it's gonna work, but that's an example of we've got to do a lot of massaging. There's a lot of maintenance on that up front versus somebody that's been in the job for 10 years. They're paid the same salary all the time, their social security income, whatever it may be. Okay. So yes, we can, because let's say you refer somebody in the day, we're going to talk about how to refer somebody. You refer somebody in the day, we take the initial call, we get permission for credit, we're setting them up for their loan consultation within 24 hours, as long as they work on it.
what about the property too? Because there's two sides to that coin.
The property as far
Can we
as,
pre-qualify the property as appraising?
oh, that's something that I'm going to defer to you as far as what the comps are going to, I think that's a good comment I heard about the comps. Looking at what the comps are going to be, because we're in a lot of those conversations too. What do you see the comps? Kind of going back to the bread and butter. We're in that bread and butter buyer mode again, where we're back to like doing things I don't want to say the old fashioned way, but the last couple of years it's been not the old fashioned way, I guess you could say.
Right.
And what question, you had a question you're going to ask?
Well, I'll kind of add with Jim's, I mean, I don't think there's 100% way to pre-qualify the house. We're gonna have to wait on an appraisal regardless. But I got 2 points to that. One, I want you guys to think about, if you have the seller that says cash conventional only right now, and it's been sitting on market, and now you're having the price reduction conversation, the other option or the other conversation you can give them is say, hey, why don't we open this up to FHA, USDA, VA buyers right now? We haven't had any luck for the first 30 days of selling this thing on cash conventional only. So instead of going right to a price drop, which again, they don't want to do, let's open up the buyer pool a little bit. Now, yes, there will be an appraisal, but we'll have a buyer at this price point. If the appraisal comes in low and we were talking about a price reduction anyway, we're probably going to be talking about the same thing regardless here. Now, again, depending on the property and all that, we do have obviously some concerns and what you guys need to analyze. But I would definitely be willing in this market now to give Sean a shot at it with USDA, VA, FHA over just instantly doing these mass. I showed a property yesterday at a $100,000 price drop.
Whoa.
I would have given it. Now, this house would not qualify USDA. So this one was probably unusable in that loan type. It had a lot of repairs, but $100,000 price drop, that's a big one.
I have one right now that's VA that I went in advertised the VA. And I didn't think there's any way it would pass VA. It's a 2004 roof. It's got real bad cracks in the driveway. It's just not great. And our VA appraiser, our local VA appraiser, he's not so great.
He sucks.
Like, I'm very afraid of him, and he's always the one that gets them. But I just got it. No repairs, get appraised, no repairs. He must have been in a really good mood. I don't know.
We challenge the VA appraisals because I know there's only a pool of maybe 2 or 3.
That's, you know, that's okay. That's okay. So, okay, that, I'm glad you brought that up because there's a lot of times where there's over analysis on what can be, you know, say paralysis by analysis or wherever that saying is, where you say, oh my gosh, this is going to be wrong. This is going to be wrong. And we've had VA appraisal go out there and said, let the VA appraisal let it go its path before you start running around thinking you need to fix things, because you might be fixing things that don't need to be fixed and missing items that do. Let the appraiser go out there and say, okay, if we need this, if we don't need this, or whatever it may be, before you start getting overwhelmed, let's just let it play its part and go through the steps in the process. And then can you challenge a VA appraisal? Great question. VA is one of the most flexible from a qualifying standpoint for the borrower. USDA and VA, that's like the 1-2 punch. And I'll talk about some things on USDA, but on the VA appraisal. So we had one last year in Brooksville where it appraised, the contract price was, let's say $717 for VA, and it appraised, I think it's $620. They supplied comps. VA overturned the appraiser and gave it full value. I'm saying that could be that's an extreme example, but it's something where VA does have mechanisms where the borrower veteran can submit comparable sales and they can go through and reanalyze it. Other programs can be more challenging to rebut and change. VA actually is one of the most flexible ones. And if you get a VA loan where the lender denied the borrower, let's say after they started the process, they had an appraisal done, VA will allow a direct transfer of that to us because we're another approving lender. So VA they could transfer that right to us and we could work off that same appraisal. Let's say if that lender has made some kind of mistake and they denied the borrower where they could have been approved, we can come in and say, look, the file looks good. Let's get that appraisal from another lender and get that actually transferred over to us. Yes.
So if
Would you like a chair?
No.
Yeah, I got a chair.
Seller,
We've all offered.
Okay.
seller had an appraisal done on his house,
Mhm.
could that be sent to the VA?
You could use not the appraisal itself, I would say. You could take the comps from the appraisal and say, here's our comparable sales. Maybe send an MLS listings like comparable sales, you could use the data from it to help rebut that. Yes.
Going back to termite inspections, on our VA addendum, it says that the seller is supposed to pay, and usually I'll put like an additional terms.
any concessions covers that.
Yeah.
But I have a new mobile home dealer
Mhm.
that does not pre-treat before, because it's not required, I guess, in Florida to pre-treat termites.
Talking about the setup, right, Laurie?
Yeah, you're supposed to spray, for the vapor barrier and all that kind of stuff. And that has become a real sticking point for a couple deals of mine. VA does require the mobile home dealer, if it's a new mobile home, to.
I have to double check that. We do a lot with manufactured homes and we're seeing a lot of the existing ones. Okay, so I can double check that. I'm 99% confident that I know the answer on that, but I'll double check. Because VA has different handbook for new construction and manufactured homes another. So we'll double check on the vapor treating for
New mobile.
The answer
new
is
mobile.
yes.
I know.
New home,
So the state of Florida doesn't require it. VA will have a handbook. I am leaning towards, I'll double check that just to be sure. Because I know guidelines they're constantly being updated and that's something I can double check. Now, speaking with manufactured homes, VA is like this silver bullet for manufactured homes. If you get that veteran buyer, they're looking for, I can do double wides and single wides back to 1976. So VA is extremely, extremely flexible with manufactured homes. Now with USDA, new construction. All right, so let's look at new construction. I work with a USDA product. It's all under the same umbrella, so it's not a different USDA program. So USDA, as a quick reminder, USDA allows for no down payment. VA allows for no down payment. Under USDA, we can finance repairs after closing. USDA, we can also do no down payment new construction loans. So if you work with a builder, you're partnering up with a manufactured home dealer, we can do no down payment construction loans with USDA. We're working with them every week right now. Big question. So we can go no down payment, manufactured home and land. We just closed a USDA loan on a 19-acre single wide up in the Panhandle, where they're doing draws after closing to the dealer to move the home onto the lot. So brand new mobile home to the lot. So if you have any builders on a single family residence, we've got multiple single family homes that are under construction right now that close with no down payment. So USDA, I've got that on the left-hand side of your packet. So left-hand side of the packet is USDA specific. We've got the construction to permanent program. That's where the closing's up front. So remember, commissions are paid at the beginning, the closing occurs, and then the draws are given to the builder afterwards. The rate is locked at the beginning. The closing occurs where it's still the dirt. You can use this construction loan to really market those lots too, because you can get the land sale contract along with the builder contract, combine those two, and we have the upfront closing. The seller gets paid, the builder proceeds are set into the construction account, closing costs are paid, commission checks are cut. So all that happens at the beginning, at the upfront of the process. So if you have any builder relationships, this is something we can work with. I'll definitely have that call with them and introduce them to the program. Yeah.
I've done new construction with VA before, and they had to be VA certified. Is the same with USDA or no?
It's not, but I have a checklist I have to go through to get them approved. So there's
They don't have to do this whole 30-page.
yeah, it's not so I have an application they got to fill out. They'll get us things like their history. We do a background check. So it's not the VA process. So it's more the common sense things like 2 years. You have to show 2 years in business, 2 years of experience. You want to show the general liability insurance. So there's a kind of a limited checklist we go through to make sure they meet minimum USDA requirements. requirements.
Does that include the dealers as well, the home owners?
Yes, yes.
So they have to be pre-qualified. If we have a builder on new homes,
Mm-hmm.
we should go pre-qualify them with you to take advantage of these programs. Is that?
Yeah, we had talked to the builder. Sometimes the builders are adverse to paperwork, as we all are. So what I would say is if we get a deal going with the builder, that's when they're more apt to complete the paperwork, because they know they got a bird in the hand as far as one of their buyers. So that's one of those, just going through the process with the builders. Yes.
All right, I got a real fun one here. So this is the property that I showed yesterday. It's
Okay.
technically two parcels, this one and this one.
Mhm.
The house is on this one and it's pretty in rough shape, we'll just say that.
Okay.
This is a vacant parcel.
Okay.
Could my buyer do a new construction loan purchasing with this lot and this be, let's just say, not valued and still get that to go through? Or is that gonna be, I mean, I'm just thinking outside the box here.
I
if
would
there's any way
say
around it.
the problem would be because you'd have technically two structures.
Okay,
So
even though they're on separate parcels, separate
Right.
addresses.
So
and
if you
everything.
were gonna value this, one way you could do it too, if you're combining them. If you're not gonna combine them at closing and just do two separate contracts.
Right,
You could do it on one if there's buildable, that looks like
Right.
it's all water.
yeah, it's, a lot of it is, but I'm
Okay.
just trying to think outside of the box. I
It
mean, right
could.
now, the house is literally right here in this tiny
Yeah.
little corner, so technically, I think we could get away with doing something, but,
You could, if that was just that parcel
right.
and that one was not as part of the contract, you
Right.
could technically,
Now, we would have to get an appraisal, and this would have to appraise for the, I mean, right now it's listed at 475, we're
Right.
offering way
Yes,
less, but the
yeah.
appraisal would have to be for that full
unless they
amount.
wanna demolish that house.
Well, that's part of
We
the
could
talks
build-
too.
Okay, so that's part of it too, is because we've had properties where, let's say they've got an old dilapidated manufactured home on there, where the dealer will build into their cost the tear down of that manufactured home, and then the building of the new one on the property. Sometimes that can be good because it saves on impact fees. They've been happy to, as far as on the new construction part of it. And I know you want to talk about the 30-day closing on the.
I do, are you finished?
Well, I've got one I wanted to kind of tie into that. Stefan had a great question. He called in yesterday and was talking to Tom about where the VA does on private roads. And Stefan, if you want to maybe, your question was, does VA require permanent recorded easements?
Yeah. They get by that way, rather than getting a PMRA agreement.
Okay, great question.
And maintenance, right, Stefan? Right.
So private roads, one of my favorite topics, because lenders have no idea what to do on private roads. So with VA, remember it's different for each one. Okay, VA, if it's a private road, they require a maintenance agreement. But if it's a private road, they don't have a maintenance agreement. So a maintenance agreement is where everybody on the road, is everybody familiar with what a road maintenance agreement is? That's where everybody on the private road is agreed to maintain the road, and they've signed off on it on some type of formal document. It could also be a private road, like in an HOA, where they have the HOA governs it, or however it's set up. So VA would require a maintenance agreement. If there is no maintenance agreement, there is a process VA can go through where they can do a waiver of it. A waiver of the need. So the VA appraisal, when the appraisal comes in, they go through, I know we've talked about this before.
I've got one through that way.
Yeah. So that is one where the VA, depending on how close they are to a public road, there's different factors they look at, and they can grant that waiver. Okay, so the veteran signs off on it. So there is a waiver process to that. Yes.
How long does that normally take within,
I
I
mean,
mean, if you got a deal going?
you're probably a couple of days.
Okay.
Because once the appraisal gets back, then that same appraisal in their appraisal evaluation part of the process, VA would grant that. So it comes like part and parcel with getting the appraisal back. We're doing the value review. VA would be, if we don't have a maintenance agreement, then VA would be reviewing the appraisal and they'd be doing there. So that's not, so yeah, we're not talking months and months.
Sean,
Okay.
a quick question.
Yes.
What comes to mind in terms of unrecorded subdivisions is Arrowhead. I spent many years out there, just dirt roads that flood every year. There's probably 30% of the people that would enter into that agreement The rest of them like it the way it is. They don't want it to change. So
Right.
could you enter into your own maintenance agreement without the benefit of everybody? Does it have to be a 100% or can it be just you?
That's the trouble though. One of those private roads, it needs to be everybody on the road. That's why it's like almost the holy grail, because you've got to get everybody on the road to agree. People change over time. That's why the maintenance agreements it's tough. That's a tough burden to have. So if it is a private road, there is no maintenance agreement. We're going to default to doing some review up front.
Are there any other situations like that where you would know beforehand that it wouldn't qualify VA regardless, so such as the roads?
If there is, not necessarily for VA that
How
you're
about
gonna,
aluminum wiring? Is that pre-76 or what in mobile homes?
so aluminum wiring, so as long as if it's the June 15th, 76 is the cutoff. Right, that's the cutoff.
If there was aluminum wiring after 76, would that be a qualifier or a disqualifier?
It may be a disqualifier from a home inspection standpoint, but the appraiser is going to go out there. The appraiser is not determining the wiring. So the appraiser is doing the visual overview. Now, remember, so let's say the home inspector goes out there and flags this, and this. Maybe it's an insurance issue too. Maybe they can't get
Electrical
insurance.
boxes is the next question, because we're seeing that occasionally. Somebody can speak to that. There's 3 boxes that have to be changed, whether conventional or not? Champion may be one of them, I don't know.
Challenger was one.
Challenger, Pacific, Federal Pacific.
You run into that where,
The Challenger, there's a Challenger, there's a Challenger Cisco. If it's a straight Challenger, it's not an automatic. If it's a Challenger Cisco, it's got to be done. But if it's a Challenger without the Cisco, then you probably, if everything else is good, you can get insurance, just so you know.
the Challenger, what, will you repeat that?
There is a Challenger, and then there is a Challenger Cisco.
Zinsco? Okay.
So,
Challenger Cisco is, you can't get insurance on it.
So, okay, this makes up a great point, because many times the appraiser is not doing a deep dive like a home inspector does. They're doing their visual walkthrough. They're making sure it meets minimum property requirements for each program. Then you have your inspector, your 4-point inspection, whenever they're doing a deep dive. So the appraiser may come back and say everything's fine, it meets minimum, but then you're having, let's say, electrical, you're wiring all this with the inspector, or that becomes maybe an insurance issue. Obviously, you got to get insurance to get any kind of loan. So that might be a separate issue that needs to be fixed apart from the appraisal. So that might not be an appraisal concern, it may be more of an inspection, insurance related concern.
Well, that particular double tap is one concern, aluminum wires is the other, and the type of box. And all of those will throw that into la land in many cases, unless it's completely changed. And it's not practical to change out aluminum wires in a mobile home, as an example.
I mean, that's going to be
That's all, but it is possible.
so yes.
You mentioned the private road waiver. Do you know if there's anything for FHA?
Okay, so yeah, that's what I was gonna go through next. So for FHA and USDA, if you have a private road, you do not need a maintenance agreement. So that maintenance agreement requirement was for VA, and I'll go to conventional in a minute.
Is not, because I just had a buyer's agent deny a property she
Me
looked
too.
at. You,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, because they.
Yeah, their lender said if it was on a
So
dirt road.
the lender may, okay, so I'm glad you mentioned that dirt road. So it's not whether it's dirt, gravel, or paved. It's how the county classifies it as public or private.
It's private.
Okay, because there's a lot of classifications out there where it's a public right-of-way, or maybe unpaved. So a public right-of-way classification is where the county will come in case of an emergency. Let's say a hurricane comes through, and they will clean it there. They won't do day-to-day maintenance, but that still classification still defaults to a public on the appraisal, because the appraiser has public and private. So I caught a VA appraisal, came in 2 Fridays ago, and I was watching for it because I knew it was a public right-of-way road. I know the road, I've done lots of loans on it. And the appraiser said public, and he said privately maintained, and I had to call him, and I had already my PDF I was going to send prepared, like when they did the contracts, I knew. And I said, you know what, sir, this is just, this is not privately maintained. The technical wording is public right-of-way, non-county maintained. And that's the difference between, it's a different classification, and I sent it to him and he changed it. He said, you're right. This is, having the word privately maintained was, and then having the box check public is just confusing. And I said, we're gonna fix this till it's the right way. So if it is truly private, now, but lenders I've seen emails come through from underwriters where it said USDA, FHA, they won't lend on a dirt road. They're hung up on the dirt road aspect of it. That's one whole nother issue. But and they may have what's called an overlay. An overlay is where the lender requires something above and beyond what the guidelines require. So you have to show permanently recorded easements on USDA and FHA. And what you have to, so that would be a lender requirement for that particular one. Or they don't know and they just are regurgitating what they were told.
So just for you guys, she's got an FHA buyer that's on a private unpaved road.
Yeah.
Can you do an FHA deal?
You can if you can show permanently recorded easements for ingress and egress.
Can I follow up with that? We have 2 subdivisions that are platted, recorded. They're accepted into quarter-acre sites. The Highlands, Wayne, you know the different lots, that's 400 we sold.
Right.
And then Lake Estates, they platted, recorded, but the county has, or the city in one case, has not accepted the maintenance of the roads. Now, would that be FHA financeable?
It appears that we would get proof that the easements have been recorded for ingress and egress.
That's a no, yeah, that's a
Okay.
given.
Then that
But
would
there's
be.
no maintenance.
Yeah, that's okay, because it's private then. It's gonna be private, then it'll be,
Well, it would be private maintained, but you just used another verbiage. You said, what did you say?
Non-county.
None.
so if it is a public right of way,
It's a platted recorded subdivision, so it does have ingress, egress, public, the roads. They're public roads, but they're not maintained.
so I would check, first thing I do is I would check whether it's private or public, that sounds workable. Okay, whether, in public's always workable. But I would take the next step is I would call Roads and Bridges. And whenever there is a confusion as to the road type, check with them if it's public or private. That's always what you would do first. And then the analysis bases off that. So if it's private, then we make sure we got the easements.
Right.
And then we can proceed down.
Well, they're public right of ways. It's platted and recorded,
Okay,
but
well,
it's non-maintained.
That's okay. So that was just like that example I just gave on the VA one. So then, because they're gonna check mark public on the appraisal. And that's something you gotta watch. So if you know, if you think there might be some confusion, check with the Roads and Bridges. Is it a public right of way? Is there some type of public classification? Or if it's truly private? Okay, did that answer?
Yep.
Okay.
You might need to.
And then remember, conventional has a split. So, I'm sorry, did you want?
No, it's just.
Conventional, Fannie Mae requires a private road maintenance agreement, Freddie Mac does not. So those are both under conventional umbrellas. So it gets in the weeds quick. So I don't want everybody to start to fall asleep when I'm talking about private roads. Here's what you want to, when you take a listing, know if it's public or private. When you're going to show a home, know if it's public or private. If you have any questions, check with Roads and Bridges and call my office. We'll help connect the dots on program eligibility, what we need to do, what are next steps. Now, how many times do you come across, so is that good on private roads? Because there's a lot of confusion. Don't make it too confusing. Just think, don't worry about if it's dirt, gravel, or paved. Find out if it's public or private, number one. Number two, call us and we'll go through what program eligibility requirements there are. It's really 1, 2, yes.
For your onboarding process, let's say we have a client that doesn't really like to fill out forms, do you have a facilitation process that takes them through that so you can get your deal going? Because we have a lot of folks that just don't want to fill out forms, they want to go on the internet and index and that's it.
Yes, great question. I think we talked before and you segued into this perfectly. This part of so yes. So on the right-hand side, how to refer a buyer. So the best way to do that is because we serve rural areas predominantly. very rural areas. If anyone's ever been to Okeechobee, anyone ever been to Clewiston, Moorhaven? So so we're in rural as they get in Florida. So it's a different type of buyer, as you mentioned, 100% accurately. There's more human resources involved in the onboarding. So the best way to refer somebody, you got my card there as well. So it's call, text, or email, get permission. Let's say you're working with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. They say, is it okay if I give Sean and his team your phone number? Tom's doing a lot of these calls where they call in, or we get permission, you text their information in, you email their details in. We all have a shared inbox where we all can see and we all stay organized on my team. And then we will call them. They know we're calling. You've told them we're calling. We call them, and that's preferable because we're not waiting on Mr. and Mrs. Smith to call us, and then we're able to update you because we're known for our follow-ups, communication, and closing on time. And that establishing that referral in the beginning, after all these over 2 decades, that's still the benchmark. That's still the foundation that leads to all the follow-ups, the communications, and the closing on time. Having that healthy referral to start with, and if you can just get us their contact information, call, text, or email, then we will start to follow up, and we then put your name in their system. We're updating you by phone, text, email, however you prefer. Because I've got the resources in the office where people are actually answering the phone. Imagine that. People are actually making phone calls, talking on the phone. Can you imagine that? What a crazy idea. Imagine having a conversation on the phone. Do people still do that? Yes, we do. Yeah, you know what? I remember like back in 04 and 05, I had these postcards that said, we will call you back. And even it was the same story back then. Nobody would return calls. And it's like, oh my gosh, you called me back. Someone would say, well, yeah, you left a message. So that's the natural progression. You make a phone call, and you pick up the phone, and you dial the numbers. You have a question?
Yes, we had a VA mortgage assumption in our office. We had both sides. Both agents said never again.
Is that the one we were talking about last time? Is that still going on?
No, it closed.
Okay.
But it's still not completed. That house is still in the seller's name.
That's what we had that call. Yeah, we talked on that one.
Yeah.
That was like June or July, I thought.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we've discovered, at least with this lender, is they have one person that works VA assumptions, and obviously they have 1,000 people that'll work new loans, yada, yada, yada. Is that just kind of how it is across the board, or what's the general consent? Because, like, the two agents are like, never again would I even offer this as a suggestion to a seller and or buyer because it was that
By the
bad.
way, and the reason it occurred was because it was a 2% loan and now we're in a 6%
And
environment.
we would love to offer
So
that
there's
product.
good reason to do it.
Yeah, we would love to offer that product, but we're not going to offer it if we have a 6-month ordeal because that's going to ruin our relationship with the customer.
I would say we are not involved in the assumption process.
Okay.
Because that happens post-closing. We would not have any impact or influence or any processes involved with that. I would say everything you said is on the accurate side.
Okay.
You're going to have less, I'd say, human resources available on that assumption side than on the new origination side. And so, yeah, I would say I can't say they're all going to be like that. I'm more not involved with that part of the process. But if you told me the process going through, I'm not surprised. It's going to be a very bureaucratic mess, which it sounds like is what it's been.
Sean, can we go back to the appraisal very quickly?
Yes.
FHA, VA appraisals, do they follow the property? If you have an appraisal and it fails, does that property still have this stigma of that appraisal?
FHA does for 6 months. VA has a similar time frame as well too. With VA, so speaking with appraisal.
That's only if you go to VA or FHA financing. with
Right,
another.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so right now, I actually had a buyer that went VA on a property, and it's down in Highlands County, and the listing the appraisal came in low. It was overpriced. The appraisal came in low, and kind of like Wayne was saying, go by your CMA, go by the data, don't just throw it out there. And from the background, what the agent told me is, well, the seller wanted to try this number. And they throw it out there and try this number. the data didn't support it. So the appraisal came in low of what the seller wanted, but it was at market value. So the seller actually, they rejected the attempts to try to re-engage with the buyer at a lower appraised value. They then since reduced the price to what it appraised for. And we had a new buyer go on that property with an FHA loan. So that appraisal is not won't stick to that. Okay. FH is a different buyer. He had different financing, so it's a new appraisal. Okay, so conventional FHA, VA, USDA are all independent of each other. Only when you have a buyer going back to that property with the same type of financing with a short amount of time, are there sometimes restrictions on that?
Well, and I was gonna say, it was an FHA deal, appraised low, fell through. A new FHA deal came in, new buyer, got a whole new appraisal, and it did appraise. Now, maybe the time frame was long enough. I mean, it was within probably 2 months of each other though. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that was a fluke or how that one ended up working.
Because they have a case number, because the case number follows the property.
Right.
So
yeah, we got a new appraisal and it went through. So I don't know, maybe stars aligned on that or something.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how that one would have worked out, but you know what?
Maybe there were some things about that the first appraiser that I don't know. Maybe they were able to throw it out because
and that is possible too. Depending on that appraisal, the validity of that appraisal, there is a process to go through where you can rebut that. Not as friendly as the VA process is, but, and so what we do on my team in the office, going back to how you can refer a buyer. So when you refer, let's say Tom's one of our loan approval specialists. I know he spoke with many of you in the office. I wanted to bring him up there so you could meet him in person. And then we also got Jackie and Crystal on our pre-qualification team. Then we also have an underwriting and processing team. I know you work with David, you work with Dory, Meredith as well, Lonnie. So they're back there. Once we get the contract in, the file just moves down the hall from qualification into processing and underwriting. So we take everything we've learned in the beginning where we scrub the file, clean the fish, however you want to say it, and delivered it back to processing and underwriting where they're focusing on meat and potatoes, appraisal, title, survey, updated documents, going through if anything's changed on the file. Okay, do we have to update the loan? Do we have to reconfigure the loan? Because I mean, everything, sometimes it's like, I hate to compare it to this, but sometimes it's like making sausage. You don't want to see, I mean, there's so many, like when we're doing this repair escrow with septic tank drain field in the beginning, we got roof concerns. On that one, they had to fix electric to get the clear 4-point. So that wasn't an appraisal sticking point, the electric, but to get the clear 4-point, they had to update the whatever. I'm not an electrician. Right? I don't play one on TV. So once we get that upfront qualification, we really lay the foundation so it can be hand off in the processing and closing. And that's really how the true team works. I see some of these teams out there where it's like one processor for 25 loan officers. That's not a team. That's complete
chaos.
Yeah, that's a disaster. So that's how. So when we get that up front, just say, look, Sean or one of his team members are going to call you. Let me share with you his contact information. You just get permission for them to call us. Just get us their name, phone number, email if they have that. Then we start calling and reaching out and letting you know. Okay, I'll give you an example. We got a referral yesterday. We called the buyer right away. And they called their realtor and said, I wasn't familiar with the number. I'm sorry I didn't return their call. We're calling them again today. But we called the realtor and said, look, so-and-so didn't answer. We left a message. And that triggered them to follow up with the buyer. So we're not losing a week go by. We're calling them today from yesterday. We're following back up with them again today. So that conversion of the lead right now and trying to squeeze out. And one of the other tips we do, this is great for you to know, because right now every buyer is turning into huge value. You want to have as many buyers in your stable as you can as they're out there getting offers put in. So what happens if a buyer's minimum credit score just misses? Has anyone here had a turn down because of credit score recently?
Yeah.
Ever? Okay. So we will go down to a 580 score on USDA, FHA, and VA. and 620 for conventional. Just because you have a 580 score, I get the question, Sean, are we going back into these days where it's going to be, as the score goes down, there's more, we were just talking about this in the car on the way up. As the score goes down, there's more validation and verification that goes into the process. We just closed one down in Sebring, at 587 credit score. They bought a $340,000 house. The reason they had a low credit score, they had 4 medical collections. They had long time on the job. They had good debt ratios. They had good overall credit, but their score suffered because of 4 recent medical collections. And if I've got good job time, good income, good debt to income ratios, good verification of rental history, and the score is only lower because of medical collections, that's just not the score. It's looking beyond the score. And just like the same token, if you get a 700 credit score, but they have just very minimal credit, they may not be a true, just the score itself doesn't guarantee an approval, get your foot in the door. Yes.
2 questions. I just got a buyer turned down on a loan because they wanted to buy here. Her husband does lawns in Bradenton. She goes to Miami on the weekends and works. But they're not planning on changing jobs.
Right.
Because they commute, they would not allow them to get a loan.
That is something that's coming up more and more as families are stretching and trying to, so that commute, I would say, so they live here right now.
They're wanting to purchase a home here.
So they live in Bradenton area now.
Yeah, he wants to travel the hour to Bradenton. When she goes to Miami just on the weekends, has a good job, and then would be up here during the week. She lives with her mom while she works.
I would err on the side. I mean, I'd love to say yes to whatever deal they can. I would err on the side of, because right now in the world, let's say 7-8 years ago is a different analysis. I would say no way 7-8 years ago, it's not a reasonable commute. Even with that scenario today, I'd say that's going to be a tough commute because I know the drive. I've driven that whole corridor, so I know more or less what it's going to take.
The money, even on an hour commute.
Right. Now, if he had lawn care service up here, he had accounts in Ocala, he had Bradenton, you can connect the dots for he's in a lot of locations, but if everything's tied to Bradenton, and especially that type of, I'm glad you brought up the position, because that type of profession is really hands-on. He's watching the crew, I'm assuming. He's monitoring the day-to-day. That's going to be a tough commute. I would say it's an unreasonable commute long-term.
How many accounts do you think you would need to get the dots?
You have to show history. I mean, we get receipts, we get invoices, we show some history.
Yeah.
There could be a second home. It could be a 10% down second home we could classify it as.
I think they're looking to do, FHA.
Right. So that is going to be a challenge from a commute. But in today's world, we open up everything because there's a lot of telecommuting. Commutes now are longer than they have been historically. So we take that into consideration too. So we've had some where, let's say 10 years ago, I'd say that's not really realistic, but as times have changed, it becomes realistic. I think that one, just from the facts you're telling me, I would err. Yeah, I think it's a tough.
The other one I got turned down was a VA loan, and the guy had per diem for, I don't know, he's worked a job for several years as per diem, and I can't include that as income.
Was it taxable per diem? Was it?
He does not pay taxes on
Okay. Okay, so for example, let me pivot. I would like to look at that one for VA. I think, how long ago was that one?
This was September.
Because VA is going through an overhaul of their handbook. And because right now VA is actually extending out they're in the process of requiring that overtime to be with the same employer they're going to be, instead of having multiple jobs connected. So they're overhauling their income portion of their handbook right now as we're in the process. So I would like to look at that, because if for some reason it won't fit into VA, USDA is a nice transition as a backup, because I can use per diem, but USDA's got some separate guidelines on per diem, whether it's taxable or not too. So I think that's open, because I'm seeing a lot of second opinions on debt to income ratio questions where they didn't analyze the handbook properly. I like to at least get a pay stub from, I could talk with the buyer and say, look, we won't run credit right away. Let's assume credit's good. Let's just get some pay stubs in. Let me have the conversation with them and see if we can turn that around into a buyer. Then I can compare USDA versus VA. Because right now what we're seeing is a real disconnect from the guidelines. Because all these lenders, they've been around for, let's say, 2 years or so, 3 years. They're used to, like I said, 2.5% conventional 800 credit score buyers. We're out of that era. Just like you mentioned, put it on the market, see what it's going to get. That ship has sailed. We're in a new market right now, where we're back to manufacturing the buyer. So yeah, if you can make the introduction and say, look, let's just have a second opinion without going through a lot of the paperwork. Let's just get to the point. We know the potential issue. We can dissect that from the beginning and have that pinpoint call. Any other? Yes.
Yes, beside the credit check, how about the background check? So you guys check the background first or wait for the last minute? Because the reason I'm asking, I have one loan right now, and then they just pull up the background check, and then the buyer get like 25 years ago with criminal record, and then keep the deal.
So as far as we don't go through background checks, we don't have a background check process. So I don't know what the program was on. There are some, yeah, I don't know that one.
Yeah, this was like a week before closing. They did a
felony?
background check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The loan was approved, they withdrew it.
What bank
because-
was this?
That's a commercial loan. Yeah.
Okay, that's, okay, so that completely, so we're not, residential not gonna require, that'd be something specific to that bank, it sounds like.
Yeah, thank you.
It was self-defense.
Yeah.
Stephanie?
On the private roads, which one was the good one, Freddie Mae or?
Okay, so Fannie Mae requires a maintenance agreement, Freddie Mac requires that proof of easements. So you don't need the maintenance agreement for Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae you do. So if you get a lender that's going conventional, you got a private road, make sure they're processing under Freddie Mac is a more favorable one for conventional. If you got a question, just call. Any other great questions, guys? Yes.
Sorry, last one. How about the VA, USDA, or FHA appraisal compared to the conventional appraisal? Is it the value lower or?
No, great question. I know we've had these conversations too. I'm not worried. Maybe we turned you into a VA believer on that. That one came through.
I still have my shot here.
Yeah, I know. So I'm not seeing any, actually, I'm seeing favorable, I'm not seeing, I don't see any marketable difference.
Okay.
Sometimes I see more flexibility on our VA and USDA even.
Even though if the appraisal value below for VA, we can submit the come to support.
You can. And then with USDA, let's say USDA's got this nice feature. So, all right, follow me on this. Because there's a lot of misinformation out there about this. If the home appraises for more, so let's say you got a USDA buyer, 275 purchase price. If it appraises for 280,000, so our appraised value is higher than your purchase price.
Yeah.
USDA allows you to increase your loan amount up to the appraised value and roll in closing costs that way.
Oh, okay.
They don't automatically go into the loan. A lot of lenders will tell this to buyers. They say no down payment. We have the whole conversation with them. Yes, it's a no down payment loan, but it is not the same as no money out of pocket. And here's how you could pay for your closing costs. We make sure they have their money up front, but if it does appraise for more, you can limit that out of pocket by financing your cost into the loan. Because USDA will allow you to increase that loan up to the appraised value. You don't need any separate addendums for that. Because that's just happening on the borrower side. It's a loan, and they're borrowing it, including it within their financing. So it's not a separate addendum. There's no concessions. And that's only once we get the appraisal back, we determine what the value is, if they can or can't finance in those costs. So but make sure you don't tell the buyer, I heard Sean say they roll into your loan automatically. Don't say that. So you talk to them about how you can maybe include your closing costs. That's safe verbiage.
I just have a question. I have a USDA loan on the seller side, the buyer's USDA. They started out with the offer asking 6% seller concessions for buyer's prepaids and closing costs.
What's the price?
$245.
That's insane.
Okay, thank you.
That's 100% insane.
I was gonna ask, what is standard? The sellers understand that it's a young couple who wants their first
Right.
home. They're in favor of that, but they don't wanna drop their price $9,800.
Right. So 6% is gonna be, that's almost two.
It's 9,800,
Well, if you go the full, is it 250?
245.
Okay,
with
so
the
that's
offer.
almost 15,000.
We know, we agreed to 4%.
Okay.
Now, that's still 10 grand.
Yeah, that's, depending on the insurance, I always figure insurance. So if you were to say 3 to 4%, I'd say 3%. I don't know the buyer's out of pocket either. So sometimes the buyers, when I'm talking with buyers, I say, listen, seller concessions could be possible. Here recently, they haven't been. You just getting your offer accepted was an anomaly too here recently. I said, when you go ask for concessions, here's what you have in the bank right now. Here's where your money is. Remember, the more you ask for, the less the seller wants to take your offer. Let's put together a reasonable number, and then we have the conversation with your realtor. Say, what do you think we could reasonably ask for? That's not 6%. That's not $15,000, because that's insane.
Yeah, they started out with 6%, and the seller said no.
When you start getting close, like 250, 300, 325, if you're in that 3 to 4% range, because I'm even figuring higher insurance premiums too sometimes, because that's part of the settlement charges you got to figure in. So I would say on this one, if you said if they have no money, I would say 250 sales price, give or take 3%.
Okay. Yeah, they say they have.
Can't you roll that into the loan and just add the 3% on?
You could,
If it appraises?
you could say if it appraises, yeah, you could come back and say, look, we're going to do
50.
Yeah,
Raise it up
250,
by 5,000.
and we'll give you your 4%.
Right, well, they're right now, as of 9:30 last night, we're looking at, the counter is, because the original offer was 245, the list price was 245. The buyer's willing to go up 247 to 247.5
Okay.
to keep more money, so to speak,
Right.
towards their closing costs, rather than the seller saying, no, we're only gonna do this. So we're still back and forth, but I was wondering, is there a standard concession?
I would say there's not standard, but I do see a lot of lenders do that 6%. But you don't need 6%.
And that was what's the average closing cost buyer side for a USDA loan?
I would say on any loan, so not just
Okay.
not just specific, depending on your sales price. If you'd say between on that 250 price range, if you'd say between 3 to 4% would be, I think, a safe range
Okay,
with variables.
Question
So 8
on
to
that.
say 8 to 10,000,
okay,
7,500 to 10,000, because that gives us some room for variables that we may not be aware of that's unique. It might be on the lower side, it might be on the higher of that range. But I think that 7,500 to 10,000 is a safe range to be in that 250 to 300 range.
okay,
I think and obviously sales price and loan amount size will determine the percent. Like if you have an $80,000 loan amount, that 6% is a lot different than 6% on 250.
right,
And then one thing I wanted to mention as I finish up is, and I'll be around if you have questions afterwards too, but we are, as the approving lender, that's one thing, especially on USDA, you want to ask some of these, there's not a ton of approved lenders out there. So you want to ask, is it a broker? Is it a credit union? Is it somebody that's not USDA approved? Because they're not doing the underwriting. And that's where USDA has done a bad rap in the past, is that person takes a loan, then they have to submit to somebody who does the underwriting. Then that person works with USDA. We do everything in my office. We do the underwriting, the approving. Years ago, I sent all the paperwork into USDA, Washington, D.C. They cross the T's, dot the I's, and then we get authority to do the underwriting as an approving lender. We do the funding, we do the underwriting, we do the qualification. Same with VA, everything right down the assembly line. We have complete control of the credit process. Any of these issues that come up, if we have a question or USDA has a question, they come back and talk to us. They don't go to a third party. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. Then we've got the streamlined approach. And some of these companies are set up now where they got all these branches out there, branch managers. There's too much cost in the process. There's too much in there. That I had a quote the other day where it was some branch operation like PRMG or something like that, where it was a 760 credit score USDA loan. At that point, I quoted her between 6.5 to 6.75. She was getting quoted by somebody else 7.5%.
Sounds like Rocket Mortgage.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, yes.
So one of the questions I would get is, what are the fees?
Mm-hmm.
How do you work your fees into it so that I can explain that properly?
So any loan origination fee, you got to assume, let's say 1% origination. Depending on the program, you get a processing and an underwriting fee. So loan origination, processing, and or underwriting, depending on the loan program. There can be a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on also the buyer too. Okay, whether it's the construction loan where we're underwriting both the property and the buyer, where we're setting up draws after closing. So and you can defer, so you don't get on a limb with that. You can say, look, their costs can be paid by the seller. Depending on your loan, you may be able to include those into your loan. Talk to Sean and his team and they'll walk you through it because that's going to be dependent too on your loan program, your personal situation. Because as soon as you say anything, they're going to hold you to that till the end of time. Like just like I said, you told me we could offer this. Well, now things have changed, so.
Could I ask one last
Yes,
question
yes.
about the rolling the amount of, let's say in your case where you had a 6% request, if you put in seller concession on the buyer's closing costs up to 6% and it turns out to be 3%, then does it go from 15,000 to 7,000 because they're not using the entire 15,000? They're using whatever you said would be a reasonable amount.
And that's what I think it's a great question because if anything excess, if the seller's not paying for it, it would come back to the seller because there's nothing to pay. They're not writing a check to the buyer.
Yeah, not to exceed, but if it's less,
Yeah.
the seller gets the concession, right?
And I'm just concerned then the lender's gonna be building in all these extra like discount points and all these extra costs to eat up
Well, you wouldn't do
that
that.
6%. No. But some of these lenders out there, because they have so much cost into the process. The idea is to trim that number up. I have the exact opposite theory of how you should do it than what that lender's doing. I say you work together, imagine this, pick up the phone, you call the realtor you're working with, you talk to the buyer, and you try to trim up that number with what they need to as little as they need to ask for based on what they have in their bank. Maybe they only need 2%. So I tell them at the end of the day, the object is to get you in the home, not to haggle over money you don't even need.
Right, well, in this case, the buyer's agent specifically told me that the money that they have in the bank, the buyers have in the bank, they have to keep that money in the bank or they won't qualify.
That's possible too. They may need reserves. I don't know. So I don't know enough about that buyer.
Yeah,
If,
me either.
It sounds like they're pretty deep in the, if they're open to a second opinion, I could have a we do a lot of the conversations where we have a second opinion without having to process credit. But we'll just talk to them about their scenario and see if, we have sometimes sellers say we require qualification through Metroplex. They don't have to close through us, but they need to get qualified to make sure this is a legitimate buyer. And can we trim up the, just like, I think that's a good segue for you to.
I'm ready, are you?
Yeah, I'm ready. Please.
I wanted to just take a couple of minutes to endorse these people. We had a situation, my accountant, I don't know if you know Oliver and Company, but they're building a new house and John, who also works with Oliver, is a paraplegic, so it was a very sensitive situation. We listed the house and in the listing I said conventional and cash only for the obvious reasons that we've kind of expressed, okay? The house won't appraise, which would be the most important. And secondly, the questionable credit. If it's 100% financing, they have nothing in the, how it normally goes. Anyway, despite what I had said in the multiple listing, no VA, FHA, USDA financing, the people met, we looked at the property. This was a broker down in Hernando County. And then they sent me a contract, which was VA request, VA financing. And the people happen to like each other very much. So a very nice family, great people. We sat down and discussed it and they decided that they would try VA financing it under one condition, and that they were pre-qualified, they were using another VA finance. I don't know who it was, you might remember, it really doesn't matter. But I said the only way we'll accept this is if Sean or Metroplex gets involved, because I know that these guys Can't you tell they're pros? So they accepted that, and that was on a Saturday, if I remember, or was it
You
a Sunday?
100%. You called, we spoke, we got everything going, and then
I said, this is probably an uphill battle, probably won't happen. I gotta get this out of the way so that we can go back to cash and conventional if it's not gonna happen. So on a Saturday afternoon, these guys got busy, pre-qualified it tentatively right then and there. And we moved through the closing process, and within 25 days,
yeah, we were
maybe 20, I don't know. It would look like a miracle.
We-
I'm a born again.
we were actually ahead, but we had to do the 30 days because they wanted to
Yeah,
have the
we had a delay, but
Yeah,
it wasn't you guys. It was they had to get out and make other arrangements. So my point is this, I truly know that it's important that you deal with people that know what they're doing. And these folks know what they're doing, especially as direct lenders or underwriters. So again, I think a third-party testimonial, especially from me, the original cynic, will give support to what they do and how they do it. I think you told me at the time, we have more flexibility because I was concerned about the appraisal. I said, this thing will never appraise, period. Especially wouldn't appraise VA FHA financing. And sure enough, you said we had more flexibility, and within a couple of weeks, we had the sale tentatively approved, pre-approved, and it went through without a hitch. Now, that may be the exception rather than the rule, but with these guys, I find it's the rule. They'll tell you straight up whether it can or can't be done. So that's why we have such a good relationship. Let me say one other thing. Wayne, what is our cash buyers in this county? 45%? If you want to increase your market base, which will increase your sales, consider VA FHA financing. It's true that it's been hard to get them appraised. It's been hard to get anything appraised because people say, here's the number, we give them a good base price, and then they put 10, 15, 20% on. And normally what we do is we say we test the market. Now, Wayne suggested we don't do that anymore. I agree with him. There's still a question of a lag time. When you go out, I went out twice yesterday with Sam. I don't see him here today, but you know, the people are still very optimistic about pricing and they still want more than the property's worth. Would you agree with that? Mm-hmm. So we have to be doing two things. You have to price it right and we have to have marketing. That's what made us successful. I don't see the numbers on the board, but what were we, 250 million in sales, 1,700 sales last year? The third element of that is to be increasing your market base by 45% is to go to VA FHA financing and get somebody that knows what they're doing. Don't pretend to know what financing is. What I want you to do is know where to go to get the experts to tell you what can and can't be done. Now, there's some obvious landmines that will blow it up. And you should know that much, but I would still go to these guys and say, hey, you know, this is the problem. Let's not discover it halfway down the trail. Let's talk about it up front. But if the market's tightening up and you're worried about your sales next year, if you want to double your sales, get that other 65%, which is finance situations, and get people that know what they're doing, like these guys. Having these guys as our partner, Metroplex, is extremely important to our business and your success. So that's all I had to say. It was
amazing. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
And I really mean it. You know, I don't compliments is something that I usually don't hand out too well, but in this case, these guys did it. I mean, everybody lived happily ever after. Thank you very much.
No, thank you that was a great call we had on that Saturday. We talked about all the concerns. How do you talk to the seller? How you asked me how, and I got on the phone. And I was talking with the sellers too, just to. Not that always happens, but one thing I'm doing too is when you're putting an offer in, I'm calling the listing agent. I'm saying, here are the strengths of our buyer. That in itself, we're winning deals on that. We're winning deals because I call in, they say, oh my gosh, I talked to a listing agent the other day, never talked to her in my life. And I had 2 calls with her and she goes, let me get your information again. Because I want to work with a lender who's making these calls. Never spoken to, I just talked to her, here's what we do, here's what we've done, here's our background, talk to me about yourself, how have you been doing? And just had just a conversation. Imagine that, right? and then she's gonna be referring us loans, buyers. It was because of VA loan shows. You know, our sellers didn't really want this buyer. We didn't really want VA. I said, this VA buyer is AAA plus. triple gold, platinum, whatever you want to say. This is going to be closing if they agree to the contract. Here's what we're going to do next as soon as we get the contract. And it was a great call. We got the contract accepted and we're moving forward.
And they didn't want to move, they were already with the VA finance.
Yeah,
But they really didn't want to, but that was the only condition that we put on the VA financing, and it worked, so it worked beautifully.
We had a good rapport with the buyers. They were super happy. They walked them through what to do, got a lot done that weekend going into Monday. So we really had set the stage and off to a great start. So I'll be available. We'll be available here for any questions you guys have afterwards. Thank you for the time. I know time is of the essence, so to say, but thanks for letting me have my, just don't be scared, be aware. Just like you said, as you're opening up your markets, don't be scared of the program. Don't think about the myths that may be out there. Be open-minded and say, what can we do? Can we get this buyer? And we'll say, yes, we can, or maybe if we can't, when can we? If they're not ready at the moment. So our goal is to get a mortgage ready from day one. So thank you all so much.
We didn't talk about.
Oh, okay, so yeah, Jim mentioned. So if we need, someone needs, we don't do actual credit repair, but we do what's called credit rescoring. So if someone's got, let's say, a 560, a 575, a 580, we look at software. You know, I can say if you pay down your Target card to $22, if you pay down your Visa card to $37, you're gonna have a 37-point jump. We just had somebody go from 560 up to 637 and got them qualified for USDA. They're going to be putting an offer in for a $299,000 purchase. So we'll squeeze every bit of power out of that buyer. Okay, I guess you can clap now.
Real quick, before you guys go, Judy did want to ask you guys a couple things.
If you want to increase the
Some more of these, or at least one more.
business, very, very competitive with how this broker is. And I talked with Jim and Karen about the idea that we could, take advantage of our position, our physical position here, and maybe do a community yard sale for our customers, where they can come and, maybe it's welcoming back the snowbirds. I think the fastest we could do this, if people are interested, is probably like mid-December. And it will probably take about 12 people to, get together and figure it out. We'll need people, just have like booths where, our customers can come and do a little yard sale, do their own thing. But because we're here on this big street and we could have signage and stuff, it'd be so great for them. It'd be a huge advantage to us. No other brokerages are doing this. And this is something everybody needs. Everybody has too much stuff. I was hoping we could do it like in the fall, but it got away from me. But, if we did it like December 3rd, kind of, not too close to Christmas, but people could do things. If you're interested, I'll send out an email. And we cannot do this unless we have like 6 to 12 people. It's just too much. But everybody should be on board. If everybody's on board, then he has, a little work. So I think it could be kind of fun. Could be a great reason to reach out to people that you haven't spoken to for a while. Like, hey, we're doing this great thing, yard sale, buy, get a 10 by 10 space, that sort of thing. So that's the idea. And if you're interested, maybe we could piggyback on Tom's thing. I'll put this in the email. On Monday, like at 10, if Tom wraps up the Moxie thing at 10, then people are interested can stay. We'll already be there. So thank you.
And if there's any other questions, I'll be following up. Tom will be following up. In the next couple of days, we'll follow up. So any questions, don't think you missed out. We'll follow up and you'll hear from both of them. We'll just, and anything that comes up, we're here.
If before you leave, I could get everyone's cards, just to know you were here, so I can follow up with you in the next couple of days. That'll be great. Thank you.
I'll grab some cards too, Tom.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.